Hello, everybody. It's Roland here. This is EX5303. But importantly, we've got Gary with us, who's going to be talking about mixed reality. You're probably wondering what mixed reality is, a term that describes a bit more than what we know as augmented reality and virtual reality. It's a kind of blending of the two. I'm not going to go into the semantics of it. What I'd like to do is show you some of the different tools. Gary's been a real good makerspace tinkerer in virtual learning environments, and you're joined here by Maria and Janelle. So, Gary, I'll just throw to you.
Well, hi. The screen you're looking at the moment is a website we discovered yesterday, as it turns out, and it's a place called Round Me, not Around Me, but Round Me, and it is a place where panorama shots can be posted. It's a free service, 15 per month. When you start doing this, you'll find that 15's nowhere near enough. So these people have worked out a really good market. The other advantage with this is that it will take 360 photos as well as panorama photos. And the difference is difficult to tell.
So does this mean, Gary, that when you're doing a recording, and I'm using my iPad or my phone to now view that recording, that metadata about where to hold is transferred to the phone? So as I'm turning the phone around, it's also changing the view?
Correct. In the corner here, there's a compass, and it actually orients north. So it's a way of doing a virtual tour. So some of us have talked about we're teaching students for jobs that don't exist yet. Here's a new job, a virtual tour guide. You can head off, take your images, you can then do your narration, and you have a virtual tour. So one could argue this is the way that Antarctica tours should go. Cut out the cruise ships, send people in, one or two people in with a lot of cameras, record everything that you can see, and let no one else anywhere near it. So you can then have a debate about environment and pristine environments and say, well, just the sheer act of 10,000 people a year going up to Mount Everest alters the environment. If they're going there to see the thing, well, put on a headset and you can see the thing. So it then challenges the whole reality versus viewing argument. You know, does the sound from the tree, if the tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Well, yes, yeah, well, and no.
If I make a web page and no one looks at it, does it really exist online? Hey, Gary, you know that you can actually add some clickable links and things in here, maybe hotspots?
Yeah, it's possible to put hyperlinks on it. There's none on this particular one that I've chosen for no other reason than I thought this looked interesting and you can zoom in on it and that sort of thing. There's no way that I'm going to get to the southern Urals in Russia, and it just looks spectacular. But a hyperlink could be there, so it's a little bit like Google Street View, in that you could click the hyperlink and it jumps you to the next scene. And so you can construct your own sequence and your own story. So it's a little bit like you've gone on the bushwalk, you take a photo. You take 100 steps down the track and you take another photo. And then you put it in your photo album and you look at the series of photos. And so what you've got is a sequence of, I saw this, then I saw this, and then I went there. This does a similar sort of thing. However, you can record video. So not only does it record what it looks like, it will also record what it sounds like. And so it's just that extra dimension that didn't previously exist. So every new camera brings something with it. There's a new camera now that will record 360 with one shot rather than having to spin your camera around. And they're quite spectacular and make things very, very simple. If you've got time and you can spin your camera, you can do it with what you've probably already got in your pocket. So
means that every
one way or another, it's a great learning opportunity. Now, whether learning takes place or not remains to be seen, but the opportunity is there, and then it's up to the talented educators amongst us to turn it to our advantage or turn it to the students' advantage. How you measure the learning then also becomes a good question. Not quite sure how that's going to work. Now, I'm just going to jump out of here. There you go. So, hello, you can see me now. And I'll see if I can discover where I thought I was heading on the other screen at home here. So, Roland, over to you for a second while I find what I was going for in the first place.
While Gary's looking that up, I did issue to everyone in the class Google Cardboard. I've kind of cheated, and I've got a commercial one that's from a company here. Free plug. But they were actually handing these out. And it's not so much that they're inexpensive, but they're a really quick way of actually being able to use your mobile phone. I'll start up an app on here. It's called Google Cardboard. Google Cardboard. And when the app fires up, it'll actually present me with a view which will have a left and right field. So here we go. Launching Google Cardboard now. It's asking me to place the app in the phone, but I'll just pretend it isn't because I want to show you what happens here. And by doing that, I've now got a left and a right picture on here. As you can see here, it's a landscape, and I have the left and the right picture. Place it into my holder. And look, now the magic isn't that I'm looking at it as a stereo. I mean, you do that with 3D TV at home. It's the fact that the phone itself has got a gyroscope built in, and it knows how I'm orientating this. So as I'm turning it around, it will actually move the landscape view and match it. And that's powerful because that'll give the impression of a virtual reality. And that's using the tool here. You can do that with your Google Cardboard and your glasses, and I'd encourage you to have a look at it. Now, that's one form of reality. What Gary's looking at here with his other one would allow you to look at the round me and to be able to change the view of the landscape you're looking at this way. And I think Apple are quite cunning in the way they're doing it. They're not just relying on perhaps a headset or glasses. They're just using something people already have, which is their smartphones, to augment maybe the reality they're looking at by just overlaying the metadata of a landscape onto the phone, or perhaps putting a recording of a place that you aren't at and laying over the data so you can explore it in ways that you couldn't.
Well, I'll just jump in there as well. The other thing, have I spoken to you since this afternoon? Probably not. After I spoke with you this morning, Roland, I've gone into the staff room and the dance teacher has her Oculus Rift there, plugged into a Macintosh, which is the first time I've seen that happen. Usually they're talking about high-end game machines to go into these Oculus Rifts. And the thing that we found was that she created an entire environment for dance, which was brilliant, and the people were sitting on the chair, but they had to turn around and swivel. And you find that having the headset on, you need to be actually sitting on a swivel, one of those bar stool swivel chairs with foot controls where you can actually spin all the way around. And so in a classroom, I find that that will be a little disconcerting, and you probably need a radius of influence spare around each student so that they're not going to crash into people. Having it on a tablet or on a phone, you're allowed to swipe to it, and you can actually share it. So two of you can look at the same image and have a conversation. So what I'm looking at here, I've got this on a computer screen and I'm just swiping it, but it could equally be on a tablet, and we could be 2 or 3 people looking at it, sharing it, talking about the same thing at the same time. But putting on the VR headset, it's quite a personal activity. And for a classroom, I'm not sure it's the sort of thing that's going to be all that useful. So, for example, I've got this one. I'm not sure. Can you see that one? VR box. That's $15 Australian delivered. So that's the equivalent of the viewer. It's got quite good lenses. It has good face connectivity. It's got a Bluetooth remote to it as I pull that out. So it's got the full arrangement. So good lenses in it. It's got a tray that pulls out that the phone can go into. And it has the option of the peekaboo window here. And so the peekaboo window opens up, which means the camera on the phone can be used. And that then allows the real scene to be overlaid with the apparent scene. So it moves beyond virtual reality into augmented reality. So we've got this mixed realities going on here for computer generated with a real scene. The advantage of real scene is it doesn't need to be redrawn by the computer. And so it's actually cheaper on the processor, whereas a VR is very heavy duty on a processor, and you need a very fast processor for your eye to be fooled. And so the refresh rate needs to be 100 or greater for a believable scene. And so some of the other, where are we? That one. Some of the other things, this is a variation on cardboard, very, very simple. It's got the slide in on the side there, clips shut, and it's got a clever magnet. No straps on it, it's just a box, and so the idea is that's just held on the face and turn around. So that's a couple of minutes, perhaps 30 seconds to have a look and then pass on to the next person to have a look at. Whereas the other ones with the straps are more designed for lengthy viewing, probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I would suggest any longer than 15 is disorientating and needs to be carefully looked at because the brain believes what is being seen, and so the person's balance can be affected. Their what do you say? The nausea that it generates can be quite sudden, and so you just need to be very careful. That's without even talking about the content that's on the screen. So the choice of content needs to be very carefully done as well.
Yeah, gamers are very familiar with that nausea when you're playing a game, that disjunction between the real world horizon and the virtual horizon. Missing that biofeedback you normally get.
Well, of course, the whole gamer thing is a alien group to teachers. There's a little bit of overlap, but the typical 22 to 35-year-old male, which I'm reading today is an endangered species in teaching, is not all that common, and they tend not to talk about gaming in polite company all that often. So some of the experiences with this VR will be quite new. So the recording device that we're talking about for making spherical, this is a little Bluetooth motor, and the idea is that the camera is put into that on the side there, and it's got 360 by 360, and so it will record a sphere. So this is before the 360 cameras came along. There's these little Bluetooth motors that are programmable, and they just spin around and do a 360 and create, if you like, a cylinder picture. If you can imagine a single piece of paper made into a tube, and we're in the middle of it, and as we look out, that's what we see. Because effectively photographs are flat, and it's the brain that interprets which parts are further away. And so that's where the perception is reality interpretation comes from, that if you can fool the brain into believing it's further away than it is. So quite often our imagination fills in the gaps. If we think we see it, then we see it. And so the idea of ghosts coming into it, apparitions, the whole cartoon thing, some of it looks very, very lifelike. So it's a animation, hand-drawn animation or computer-generated animation, but it's believable that it could be real. And so this hyper-photorealistic art style combined with a computer-generated image makes a scene that is entirely believable as real. So the potential for that is enormous, especially now that the tools are available to students, well, to teachers and to students. So in government schools, the Adobe suite is available. In Catholic and independent schools, they've done a deal with Adobe so that it's available in most schools. And so those tools, Adobe Premiere, will edit 360 video. So you can put titles on it, you can put music on it, you can put typical filmmaking effects on it. So fade in, fade out, zoom out, follow the action. So the whole new job that didn't exist before is now the 360 movie director. The idea of being behind the camera and where you cannot be seen is now gone. And so the entire technique of how do you record a movie where you can see everybody, that hasn't been done yet. The fourth wall is gone. Typically, television works on the fourth wall idea in that you're looking at effectively a stage set, in that there's three walls that you can see and the audience is the fourth wall. And that's where the camera is placed. And all the action is facing front. That is, if the person has the back to the audience, then you can't hear them, you can't see them. And so the idea of a handheld camera is a relatively new, since the 70s technique, because before that it had cables on it. They've got wireless cameras. They can run around with cameras and record things. We now have a 360 camera. So that whole technique is now emerging and there are no rules. So one of the good things about these emerging technologies is that teachers can get a hold of this stuff and give it to the students and say, off you go. And the students say, what do I do? And say, well, we don't know. It's up to you. And there are no right and wrong. There just is something that you like or you don't like. And next time you do it, you'll improve it. And so that's why experiments are really good. That's why projects are really good. And that's why some of these emerging technologies, which may not go anywhere, but they're great learning opportunities because they demand cooperation, they demand planning, they demand an audience to watch the final product, and you can set a deadline, and so there's a sense of urgency to get something done. So this VR is an opportunity that rarely comes along, and we're right at that moment now. AR has been announced by Apple. Curiously, there's very, very few AR apps being released in the last 3 months since Apple announced their AR kit. And what one thinks is that they're just working in the background and they're going to release them. A huge run of things released from end of September. So basically September 23rd, which is now, till the end of the year. Well, end of the year is Christmas. So this Northern Hemisphere, United States Christmas market is the most money-making time of the year. Apple is a consumer company. It's no longer Apple Computer. It is Apple Inc. It's just about consumer. And they're after the market. And they think they've got it this time. We don't know what it is yet, but in about a week, we're going to find out. And so when that AR comes out, we're going to look at it and say, another opportunity for students to demonstrate their learning, which after all is all it's about.
Because otherwise it'd become obsolete next week. And at least we got it out before it became obsolete. We'd have to start.
Oh, it's never obsolete. It's just there's always a better one. And it's market forces. If you can't hold your own, if you can't sustain interest, then you go on to the next shiny thing. And some of us have been collecting shiny things for years.
This is an app. You've seen me use this before. This is Panorama 360, and I'm actually looking at someone's. Hang on, my camera. Here we go. As you notice, it's actually coupled with the gyroscope. So if I tip the camera around, you're actually looking almost through a window into someone's backyard. And I also, Gary's seen me make many of these tiny planet visualizations. That's the whole thing, as a tiny planet image. Now, it's an app I use called Panorama 360, and I've used it for about maybe 5-6 years now, I think, Gary. And it's been really popular. There are tools around, and I've discovered I can actually take the output of this and put it into the round me. Ownership's really important with it because there's metadata in here I don't want to throw away, and a lot of people don't quite understand that sometimes. It's like handing over your photos to Instagram, but not really thinking about, do I still have the originals? Can I still do my stuff, and do I still own it? The other one I want to show you is this one here. This is another app. I particularly enjoyed this one because if I just tip it here, you can see on the bottom there, there's a someone who's holding a 3D laser cut object. There's a student in the top there who's doing some soldering. And also this one here, it's a favorite of mine. This is a museum in Tasmania. Which one is it, Gary? That's the...
Or Mona, isn't it?
Yeah. So I have here a 3D visualization that I'm tipping around looking at it that I've recorded of a display. And you couldn't do justice with a photograph because it actually has all these lenses lined up so that you can actually see what an artist is painting through the way that they use to do that in order to help make accurate paintings. And that one is called Fuse. But I'm particularly keen on the idea of how can we get students engaged with this technology? How do we get them to become authors with it? And what kind of message and story they might be telling? Those are things that students are good at doing. And this is a really ripe field for being able to do it. But there is no one strategy. There is no one tool that's going to do it. It's just kind of exciting for being able to pick our way through as educators. Now, I tell you what, it's popular. This gallery that I had for the STEM learning, I don't know if you guys can see that, but check how many views my gallery has had.
You got a couple.
3.7 million views. Now, it's made an impact, but there's no monetizing. I haven't mortgaged the cat or the house yet to pay that.
Since July, that should be said. So in the time frame.
But it's been fun, and I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the feedback, and there's a very different online community. Hey, you've got some tools there used for taking and recording those 3D photographs. You want to just... Oh, you've got your Swift 4. You want to explain that first?
Yeah, I've just put this up. This is on Kickstarter at the moment, and it's the complete ArcKit developer course. So basically, perhaps not for teachers because we haven't got a spare 100 hours to go and learn how to code and such things, but maybe for students. And this basically takes through the entire new spectrum of what's available. If we have a look at it, the course is going to cost, at the moment, $25. So everything costs money. There's no doubt about it. But this is an online course to learn how to use the new AR kit. It's not ARC as in Ark of the Covenant. It's AR kit. There should be a dash between the AR and the kit, but augmented reality kit, and it's all about developer. So Apple have removed the $100 US per year license fee to be a developer. It is now free for students, and teachers. The Swift programming language is also free, and the training for that is well documented. And so the question is, if you're interested, why wouldn't you do it? So some of the activities are on the screen there. Basically, it's programming and coding, which isn't for everybody, but it's showing that it is accessible, and it's using state-of-the-art tools, and this is on now. So this is a Kickstarter that's on. It's got 56 days to go. It's asking for $2,000, so the chances are it'll get up. The idea is if it doesn't reach its goal, it doesn't get funded. So it's only been running for 4 days, and there's 12 people in 4 days picked it up. So it'll probably get up.
That's great.
So this other device I held up before was a Kickstarter. Quite a few things we've got here. Oh yeah, this is another one, Elite Motion. This is I'll just show you what that is. Elite Motion is a, I'll just show you that. There it is there. What happens is this takes the physical into the computer. So basically this connects to the computer, and it's a little sensor that usually points upwards. There we go. There it is there. So it's a little sensor that points upwards. When it's connected to the computer, it sits just above the keyboard, and then when you put your hand over it, your hand appears on the screen. And as you move your fingers, there's a ghostly hand on the screen and the fingers move. So then you can go to pick something up, say an object on the screen, and the object gets picked up by the hand and you can control it. So this particular device, the Leap Motion, can be connected to the Oculus Rift, and it sits on the front of this thing. So there's now holders that come with it, and this Leap Motion sits on the front like so. And so then when you put your hands out, your hands appear in the VR.
That's great.
So it's putting the physical into the virtual. So it's quite spectacular. It's early days yet. This Leap Motion was a Kickstarter. I think they raised 2.5 million, but then Oculus Rift was a Kickstarter as well, and they raised 10 million. And this Kickstarter is a crowdfunding activity, so that if you've got a bright idea, you can put it on there, and if people like it, it's the ultimate democracy. If people like it, they'll fund it. If they don't like it, then you'll get $0 after about 60 days. There's quite a few in Melbourne. People in Melbourne seem to put up quite a few. And it's a whole different maker community that's into this sort of thing. It's also a way now that some companies pre-sell the goods before they make them, so that they're not building all this inventory and paying for it, and it's going to sit on shelves waiting for buyers to come in the door. They've actually sold it all before they've made it. And so it is in fact the ultimate small business operation. So that if you've got a bright idea, you put it out there, see if people want to buy it, they nominate and pitch their bid for it. When you get up to the agreed number, you say, okay, close the books. I'll now make the 1,000 units and I'll send it straight out to them. They're all pre-sold. So it's a pretty smart way of operating. So that's a thing called crowdfunding.
Gary, I was going to ask you, you've got some cameras that actually take us on the 360 journey. Have you got them there, or?
Excellent question. No, I think they're in the bag downstairs at the moment. Sorry about that.
That's all right. You've got a picture there of the Insta360 one. If you want to bring that up on the browser, I'll explain the others. There are some cameras you can actually buy, which, as you know, a regular camera would just have one point of view, but they actually have the lenses on both sides of an object, which allow to capture the scene in 360. Gary's going to try and bring one up. We've had a number of different models make. It's really hard to pick, I guess, a winner that's going to be in the long run. We found a good one today called Insta361. It allows you to capture 360 movies or photographs, or there's a ball time, which had me quite impressed. There's a Samsung that we were looking at as well. And it's still very experimental. It'd be crazy to go out and buy a class set of them, but it'd be certainly worth exploring, maybe getting one of these to actually do some work in a school and to create 360 videos and to think about the fourth wall. I mean, where do you put the cameraman and how to kind of record it? How to keep the audience's attention? Is maybe just an IMAX type movie of a large spread of about 120 degrees or maybe 180? How do we work in that sort of environment? Did you manage to get a picture of the Insta360 one up?
I have. Oh, better than that. I think that's what I'm doing. So these are the sort of images that they generate.
That's great.
My nephew in Buenos Aires, he works for the Museum of History in Buenos Aires, and he's got one of these 360 cameras, and he does virtual tours of all the historical buildings around Buenos Aires.
Oh, fantastic. It's brilliant. So the deal here is that it connects to a camera or as an independent unit. Now, again, early days, and we're not saying go out and buy things. It's really the question of, in a pedagogical sense, what can the students demonstrate? What understanding can they bring? What learning can they have? And it's all about telling stories. This is all about explaining what it is that's going on. So from a science point of view, from a mathematics point of view, it's a matter of, all right, how can you explain what it is that's in your head? Get some images that will get that message across. So the obvious one for me with this 360 is environment. So you can do the tour to the zoo, you can do the tour, the field trip out to the beach. Here's a way to record it and to relive it. And so that you're looking for the student to do a narration of what it is they saw. Because the typical visit to the zoo, it's anybody's guess what the students saw. They may have spent all the time watching the zookeeper, the staff attendant at the zoo, cleaning out the cage because they were using a high pressure hose, and they were fascinated about the engine and the high pressure hose, and they didn't go and look at the giraffe, and they didn't go and look at the otters. But you've let them go because you don't follow them around the zoo. You give, here's the worksheet, here's the booklet. You have to fill out 3 of the 5, and you've got 2 hours to do it. Off you go. If they've got a camera like this, it's a question of, all right, I want you to record at least 3 scenes, and you have to describe what it is that's going on. So the workload of having a camera like this is greatly increased compared to, here's a worksheet. Even on an iPad, it's still a worksheet. Go out, take 3 photos, and tell me what you saw. So it's really a challenge to up the ante and raise the standards a little bit on what it is learners, children, have to do with the available time, because time's a bit precious. We can't afford to be just wasting their time and taking up their time. It's a question of, what are you learning? How are you learning? How can you improve your learning? So these things, the reason why they're attractive to me is that they don't cost very much. So the biggest issue with 360 previous cameras, so this is in the last 2 years, is that you didn't know where to look. The new edit tools that come with this, which are free, you've got to buy the camera, but the tools are free. So if you've got a panorama shot that you've taken, you can drop your panorama shot into this program, and you can direct the attention of the viewer. And so it's a guided tour. So it's David Attenborough. Here we go. Put the camera out there. You go away, leave it running. You then come back and you can direct what it is you're going to look at. So near to where the kangaroos are, near to where the rabbits are. Where we go Sunday mornings is kangaroos and rabbits, but you never get close to them. But if you left the camera there and then you went away, they'd soon come up close to it. So it'll be a really neat way of getting some activity recorded. And then of course there's concerts. If you're a concert goer, you can record the audience and the performance at the same time. The student I was talking to tonight plays trumpet in a band, and he never gets to see what is going on because he's always facing front. He can't look sideways and see the rest of the band and what they're up to. So by putting this camera somewhere near to the front, you'd be able to see the conductor and the whole scene, and it would record the sound. So it's a new technology. We don't know how to use it yet, so you can pitch it on the front of the surfboard. You can put it on the bottom of a drone, top of the helmet, top of the car. They probably bounce, which would be good. But this was released this week, so it's all a bit new.
I'm going to quickly switch to showing you something here. This is Google Expeditions. Start the screen share and play. I might leave the sound off. But while it's actually running here, come on. Oh, hang on. Wrong screen. This one here. There's a trap. The trap with using some of this VR stuff like Google Expeditions, I would be able to take students on a virtual excursion, take them to some places they've never actually been before. This is looking from a drone. And using my 3D glasses, I might be able to take my students on this excursion. So here they are, the students are coming in, wondering what the heck's happening. Okay, we've got these cardboard glasses. Thank goodness they've given us all smartphones. And yes, I'm excited when I got my smartphone. And here they are, they're trying out their glasses and they're on a tour. Now the teachers are able to actually direct their attention and everyone will snap to look in a particular point. And so you can actually bring the class together on a journey. That hasn't actually been ever a problem for me on an excursion, a real excursion. And I hate to think that we stop going to some places with kids and see the real world because they're going to go being led on a teacher-driven excursion. For me, the challenge is how do we make students the author of this kind of world? Because I want to do more than just have my students leading on an excursion where I'm directing their attention and learning. I'd like to see them becoming the authors and think about this as a communication tool to share and to build on. But it is what I'm looking at doing at the cave with you guys, trying to do this remotely using some of the VR technology. For those of you that can make it in Melbourne, coming to join me. Gary, I appreciate the time you spent tonight. It's way longer than I originally had thought, and I really appreciate you to share so much.
I just thought I'd put the Edtopia article on virtual reality. It's there. Now, we've lost your image, Roland. I just mentioned that to you.
Yep.
And they're predicting that it will be virtual excursions, that the leaving the school will cease and virtual excursions will basically take over. And then virtual experiments as well. So the image that's on the screen there is using and I've just the name of it escapes me. It's actually at Monash. Monash is one of two places in Australia that it's got it. It's a Z space it's called, or Z space they call it. And there's a little stylus that then activates the detector, and you get this object in space as you look at it. So you've got glasses on, and it projects like that. But the idea is it's a virtual experiment. But of course, it's not an experiment because it's programmed. And so you're only going to see, it's like looking at a cartoon. You're only going to see what the artist drew. You're not going to see anything that wasn't there. So the idea of an experiment is you've got unknown activity taking place, whereas this VR is completely known. And so I'm reluctant to be endorsing this VR thing at all. The 360, however, where the camera is handed to the students, you go and record things, come back and tell me about what it is you've done, is an extension of what we'd like to do anyway. But the VR, the computer-generated imagery, is still a little bit out of reach. The students can't actually build that yet. And if we're going to use pre-prepared material, it's just another video, in which case it becomes passive. So my attitude to Khan Academy is, as a lookup, as a quick lookup, great. As the main diet of your class, today we're going to watch Khan Academy lessons 1, 2, and 3, we're wasting their time because it's passive learning. It's been shown that unless there's some cognitive dissonance, that is some confusion, you learn nothing. And so we need to be creating just enough confusion, just enough I don't know, that they push forward because they've got a desire to achieve a purpose, and they push forward and they gain an understanding. And so that's the dilemma, that we need to get just enough cognitive dissonance. And physics and engineering's got a bad rap for that because everyone says it's too hard because we've overdone the dissonance and not too much cognitive. Whereas some of the other things going on around the place are way too simple, and some people call that easy. And it's only easy because they can do it. And so it should have been cranked up to be made a little bit more challenging or harder, if you like. So it's a new area, and this VR has got a long way to go. I'm a great fan of AR, and I'll just apologies for doing this to you while you were there, but I'll just point at this one, which is a Pinterest on mixed reality. Currently, there's 251 references to various things, AR, VR. It's been renamed mixed reality because sometimes you just can't tell the difference. And there's a lot of really good material there, dating back probably about 18 months. So a lot of references, some of the things we talked about tonight are there. So VR box, where you get it, the Samsung Gear reviews, and so on. So that's quite a handy place. And of course, QR codes are a type of AR, VR as well. So if you're looking for a starting point, QR codes are a great place to start. Because it's all about, you look at this, I don't know what it is, but your computer knows what it is and creates a reality from that. And so there's a lot of great material. I haven't looked at that. I actually published this one. I haven't looked at it for a little while, but it holds up pretty well. There's some really good examples in there. So that's a thing called mixed reality. It's on Pinterest.
Thank you, Gary, and I'll share that back with the class too. So, Maria and Janelle, thank you for staying tonight. Did you have any questions you'd like to ask Gary?
Oh, that's I think I have a lot of questions and no questions at the same time. This could go on a long time.
Any feedback for Gary then?
That was great. Yeah, it was fascinating seeing all the different things that you've been looking at. Maybe actually a quick specific question that I did have was, you mentioned that the VR box, I think, Gary, you might have said it was like $15 delivered in Australia. I was just wondering where you got that from.
Online, of course, where most things come from. I'm tempted to say Banggood, given that that's where most of our Arduino material comes from these days. But it's actually listed in this.
Oh, brilliant! I can have a search through that later.
In fact, that one there is called the Buyer's Guide. So the one that's
I can find
there,
that. No
which is
problem.
just highlighted there, is called the Buyer's Guide. I just typed in VR space box space Melbourne, and things pop up. You ignore the first three because they're paid, and then you just have a look and see what's going, and make sure you use PayPal. That's the only advice I've got with buying online.
Yes.
Good advice.
Well, thank you very much. Being so fascinated, my head is exploding.
That's part of the noise here. You've got to watch out. Remember, the real world begins to tip at a different accent to the virtual world, and just got to get the alignment there with your inner ear, and then it'll be fine.
Well, just in closing, I'd suggest that there is a forum to ask about anything, and that's STEM Australia as a team. Roland's an administrator and I'm an administrator, and it takes maybe 10 minutes to get on. And you're amongst friends, and the only silly question is the one you didn't ask. So you can ask the same question every month and someone will step forward and answer it. probably differently. In fact, if you ask the same question each month, you may find that you get different answers. So it'd be interesting to contrast the different answers you get, because things evolve.
Pending for that Facebook group at the moment.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Maria. I know the only things I didn't talk about, which I know used to be claymation and video, stop motion video, some interesting stuff for slow motion. We haven't got time to cover all the wonderful things I'd like to talk about, so I hope you're enjoying some of the stuff I put in the reading list. And thank you very much to my two guest students who dropped in today, to Gary, and also a cheerio to the other students who'll be watching this recording. And look forward to catching up with you.
Okay, great. Good night.
Thanks,
everyone.
Roland.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chanel. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks, Gary.